I've spent years studying how societies fall apart, not the movie version, the real one. And what I've learned is this: collapse never announces itself. It doesn't start with chaos in the streets or smoke on the horizon. It starts quietly, with a power outage that lasts a little too long, with an ATM that suddenly stops working, with news that no one believes anymore. By the time people realize what's happening, it's already too late. Every civilization that's fallen, Rome, the Soviet Union, Venezuela, Lebanon, thought it couldn't happen to them. But collapse doesn't care about borders or wealth or history. It follows patterns. And if you learn to recognize them early, you can prepare before everyone else even sees it coming. That's what we're going to talk about tonight: the pattern of collapse and what signs you should be watching for right now. The first stage is what I call the cracks. This is when everything looks normal on the surface. The stores are open, the power's on. People are still arguing online about the usual nonsense. But underneath, things are breaking. Prices start to rise, slowly at first. Companies begin cutting corners. News feels less like truth and more like noise. People stop trusting institutions and start turning inward. That's how it begins. Not with panic, but with doubt. In Venezuela, it started with inflation. The government printed money to cover rising costs. Within a few years, people needed backpacks full of cash to buy groceries. Food vanished. Electricity flickered on and off. Crime exploded. I remember watching footage of people waiting hours just to fill a gas can, in a country sitting on one of the largest oil reserves in the world. It wasn't war, it wasn't invasion, it was mismanagement and denial. Everyone thought, it'll get better. It didn't. That's the dangerous part about the cracks. You don't feel them until they widen. People cling to normalcy because it's comfortable. They don't want to believe the system they depend on could fail. But it always does. The second stage hits suddenly and brutally. I call it the shock. This is when one event pushes the entire system off balance. Sometimes it's financial. Sometimes it's political. Sometimes it's environmental. But it always exposes how fragile everything really was. In Lebanon, it was fuel. For years, they relied on imported energy, and when the money ran out, so did the power. The grid collapsed, hospitals lost electricity, water pumps stopped running. At night, cities went black. Imagine living in a modern city where the streetlights vanish, your phone's dead, and the hum of air conditioners is replaced by silence. That's not just inconvenient, it's terrifying. People slept in cars to escape the heat. Families cooked meals over candlelight, and the government could only say, "Please remain calm." But calm doesn't last long when survival is on the line. Which brings us to the third stage, the fracture. This is where society splits in two: the prepared and the desperate. The prepared adapt. They already have water filters, backup power, food, and a plan. The desperate take from whoever does. You see it in every collapse. When the grid fails, when the shelves empty, when people can't feed their kids, morality becomes optional. In Sri Lanka, the collapse began with debt. The government overspent, foreign reserves dried up, and food imports stopped. Within weeks, people were rioting. They stormed the presidential palace, not for power, but because they were starving. In South Africa, fuel shortages and inequality triggered mass looting in 2021. Shopping centers burned while the army struggled to contain chaos. In Haiti, gangs filled the power vacuum left by government collapse. They became the law. Everywhere you look, the pattern repeats. First, the cracks, then the shock, then the fracture. But there's one more stage most people forget: the reset. After the chaos settles, new systems always form. Local communities organize. People rebuild trade through barter and trust. Farmers become the new suppliers. Electricians, welders, and mechanics become leaders. History proves it. Collapse doesn't end civilization, it resets it. The question is whether you'll survive the reset or get erased by it. Let's talk about why these collapses happen. The roots that grow beneath every failure. First, debt and inflation. Governments spend more than they earn. They print money to cover the gap, and inflation eats away at savings until nothing's left. Second, energy dependence. When a nation relies on outside sources for fuel, one disruption, war, embargo, cyber attack, brings everything down. Third, food insecurity. Most cities have less than a week of food on shelves. When trucks stop, the countdown begins. And fourth, trust erosion. Once people stop believing their leaders, it's over. No government can function without the illusion of confidence. These four factors, money, energy, food, and trust, are the pillars of civilization. Remove one, and everything shakes. Remove two, and it falls. And right now, around the world, those pillars are trembling. Look at what's already happened in just the past few years. A ship gets stuck in the Suez Canal, and global trade slows by billions a day. A pandemic hits, and store shelves empty in 72 hours. A war breaks out in Ukraine, and wheat and fuel prices skyrocket across continents. You didn't have to live in those countries to feel the ripple, because we're all connected now, for better or worse. That's the illusion of modern civilization. Efficiency that looks like strength, but hides incredible fragility. When I say collapse starts quietly, I mean it. It's happening long before the first riot, the first blackout, the first broken window. It begins when systems stretch too thin, when everything depends on everything else working perfectly. And we've built a world where nothing can afford to fail. Let's talk about cyber and information warfare. It's not science fiction, it's already here. In 2021, a cyber attack shut down the Colonial Pipeline in the United States. A few days of downtime caused gas shortages across multiple states. People panicked. Lines stretched for miles. That wasn't even a major attack, just a test. Now imagine a coordinated strike on power grids, banking systems, or hospitals. It wouldn't take bombs or tanks, just a few lines of code. That's the next frontier of collapse. Digital warfare. It doesn't just crash computers, it breaks the flow of trust between people and institutions. Once communication fails, panic fills the void. Rumors spread faster than facts. You don't know what's real, what's safe, or who to believe, and fear becomes the new currency. That's why I always say, preparedness isn't just about stockpiling food, it's about building clarity. Because in a real collapse, information is as valuable as water. I've seen people assume collapse means the end. It's not. It's a transition. Every fallen empire paved the way for something new. After Rome fell, local kingdoms rose. After the Soviet Union collapsed, new nations emerged. After Venezuela's economy imploded, barter markets and small farms returned. Collapse isn't death, it's rebirth. But rebirth hurts. And the ones who make it through are the ones who prepared before they had to. Here's what I watch for. The 5 quiet signs that tell me a system is heading toward failure. 1. Rising inflation and debt. When people work harder but buy less, collapse is near. 2. Energy instability. If your country's power grid is running on borrowed time or borrowed fuel, that's a red flag. 3. Supply chain dependency. If your groceries travel 1,000 miles to reach you, you're not independent. You're vulnerable. 4. Social polarization. When people stop seeing each other as neighbors and start seeing enemies, unity collapses before the system does. 5. Government distrust. Once people stop believing their leaders, the government becomes a ghost. It still moves, but it has no life. We're seeing all 5 of these globally right now. Not evenly, not instantly, but undeniably. And it's not about fear, it's about awareness. Because when everyone else panics, the aware stay calm. That's the difference between victims and survivors. If there's one thing history teaches, it's this. Collapse favors the unprepared. When the blackout hits, the unprepared are the ones who freeze. When the market crashes, they wait for someone to fix it. When the violence starts, they believe it'll calm down. They rely on hope. But hope isn't a plan. Preparedness isn't paranoia, it's peace of mind. It's the quiet confidence of knowing that if the lights go out, you can still make coffee in the dark. That if the grocery shelves empty, you can still feed your family. That if the banks fail, you still have something of value, because you built it yourself. Preparedness is independence, and independence is freedom. So, how does a real collapse start? It starts with comfort. with people saying, that could never happen here, with the belief that someone else will always fix it. And then one day the fix doesn't come, the trucks stop, the lights fade, and the silence becomes louder than any alarm. That's when you realize, civilization isn't guaranteed, it's borrowed, and debt always comes due. I don't tell you this to scare you. I tell you this because I've seen what happens when people ignore the warning signs. The good news? You don't have to. You can prepare now, calmly, quietly, one step at a time. Learn basic survival, build community, store what you need, not out of fear, but foresight. Because collapse isn't the end of the world, it's the end of normal. And after normal ends, survival begins. This is the Prepper's Briefing. Stay alert, stay ready.